This week we celebrated Mother's Day, and it made me think about my own mother and what a great godly leader she's been for so many years. And it also reminded me of how in the church it's time for us to stop pushing women down, pushing women to the margins. I say that because when I think of my own mother's story, it goes back to the late 1960s when my father took a church in rural Mississippi, and my mother showed up at the first choir practice, and there was no choir director, so she stood up to lead the choir. And the organist said, "I'm sorry, Nell, you can't lead." And she said, "Why?" He said, "Because women are not allowed to lead our choir here, only men." And she said, "That's not in the Bible." She said, "I've been leading choirs for years in California." He said, "Well, if you lead the choir, then I quit." She said, "Well, then you'll need to quit." And so she said she grabbed my younger sister, Lisa, who was 12, and Lisa played the piano. My mother went on to help found 3 Christian universities in Africa. She started 3 Christian radio stations in 3 different countries in Africa. She started a TV station. She's a great speaker. She's a published author. And I tell her story because, like I said, women need to be raised up and lifted up in leadership today. And I thought those days of pushing women down ended in the 60s, but it hasn't. I was in a meeting not long ago when a man said, and he's a leader in a church, he said, "If our church ever hires a woman pastor, I quit." And I thought, where does that kind of thinking come from? That's not in the Bible. And you see, if you read the Bible well in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, women were always championed as leaders. When I say that, I think of Romans 16. There's this fantastic list of women leaders who Paul names who were leaders in the early church in Rome. Let me go through his list with you. He says that Phoebe was a deacon and a minister in the church. Priscilla he names as his co-worker, and she was also the instructor of the young preacher Apollos. There was Mary, who worked very hard, he says. Junia, he says, was outstanding among the apostles. Some translators about 100 years ago did not like the fact that she was a woman, so they changed her name to Junius, a male name. That name's not even in the Bible, but they put it there, and they buried Junia. Fortunately, the best translations have put her name back in. He also says Tryphena, Tryphosa, Persis were all great leaders and workers, hard workers in the early church. My point is this: the Bible has always championed women, not just as leaders, but equal to men. We read this first in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, where in the opening words of the Bible, we read, God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. We call this the Imago Dei, the image of God. And because God has given the Imago Dei to women and men equally, that has forever settled the question of their equal worth, dignity, value, and meaningfulness to all of us. And so I challenge you, in whatever role or capacity you have, that to promote the value and the worth of women in every area and in our churches.